G'day guys, welcome back to the Backyard Workshop DIY. Now if you've been following me for any length of time, you know how much I love having my kids here in the workshop with me. It's awesome to see them getting involved and excited about something that I'm excited about. So particularly with school holidays coming up, I thought I'd share with all of you a quick and simple project that you can do in an afternoon with your kids without any special equipment, and that is this little simple birdhouse here. Let's get stuck in and see what we need to do. First up was getting my material. So for any of you here in Australia, off to the big green shed, around the world, wherever you get your timber from. You could use absolutely anything you want. For me, nice and simple, just some 12mm thick pine. You know, this board was $12. I only need 1.5 of these. If I want to make it narrower, thicker, change my timber, up to you. But nice and simple, already as thick as I need it. Next, you need to decide how tall you want this bird box to be. So for me, I'm looking for this one to be at its apex around 200mm. So mark that out. Now if you've got a square, awesome, use it. If not, don't stress. Just a ruler, make a few extra marks. But it does help if we keep things square, helps the box all sit together. Now I've marked that out, time to cut it. Now you can use a miter saw or a power tool if you've got one. You can also just use any old timber saw. Best make sure you get it straight, but if not, it's not the end of the world. Being pine, this will pull together pretty easily regardless. Now just make sure we've cut that nice and square. We need to decide on our taper for our roof here. So easiest thing is to find the midpoint and go from there. So I'm using a 140 wide board. So that means 70 will be my midpoint. And then it's a case of working out our 45-degree angle. Now if you're using a tri-square like this solar one I'm using here, we've got a 45 on the rest here. That can help you out a little bit. Otherwise you can also just measure it out. So that's roughly my shape. You can also make sure they're in the right spot. They should both end at the same space. Now clamp it down and cut this out. Now if you're not super confident on cutting this 45 accurately, what you can do is what I've done here, and I've clamped down an extra bit of timber just as a guide board to let me cut through this on the way down. So it means I can simply place my saw blade against that, and as long as I keep that hard against there, I know I'm going to cut straight as I work my way down and through. So let's see how that goes. Now with some pine, you're going to have a little bit of tear out there that we'll have to deal with, but that's okay. But in theory, that is accurate. That should just continue on from there. Now the case of flip it around and get the other side done. So there we go, start of our birdhouse. Okay, with both our front and back cut, it now becomes about how long do we want that base to be. Remember, we want some space for a bird to perch out the front. This is where using the same board comes in really handy because it gets you closer to guaranteed you get the same width. I know that not everything's going to come off the shelf as we need it, but if I was to say lay out like so, if I want to think about it, this board's 140 wide. If I have 140 here in the middle, it means two cuts from this will perfectly fit my two side pieces here. I like the sounds of that. So now it's a matter of 12mm, 12mm, 24mm plus our 140. So I need to cut the length of this at 164 for here, but then I want a bit of a veranda. So I'm going to go to 200. That'll give me 40 mil out the front. Now cut that. Now, if you're nervous about keeping a straight line, that same trick I showed you before for cutting on the 45, putting a brace piece in works fine. You do need to make sure this is square, however, to make sure you are getting a straight cut. So once you clamp that on there, make sure your heel's up against the edge here. That's nice and straight. So if you're worried about keeping it straight, or even better, if your small human's having a crack at doing the cutting and you need to keep it straight, this can help them along. The other thing you can do to help them along is just a standard old Stanley knife and score a bit of timber a little bit. What it does is it breaks that top layer of fibres, gives the saw somewhere to sit so we can get started. So again, just hard up against my stop there. And okay, what you saw happen there, this little bit of tear out, that's owing to me using a not great handsaw. It's cheap, works, does the job, but a finer tooth saw would have been a bit nicer there, but that's okay. That little divot, it's not going to make me lose any sleep, and I'm sure it won't make my kids lose any sleep either. Okay, 2 ends and a base. Next step is going to be making sure we cut these side walls the height we need them. So the height we need is the measurement from this base to this shoulder here, or this corner here, and they'll slot in either side like that. So as I've said at the start, you can make this any size you want, but for me, that is 124 mil. So a couple of pieces at 124 mil. As I said earlier, we're going to go 140 deep, which is the width of one of these boards, so we just stand on its end, and away we go. Brace in again. Again, let's just, yep, we're square. Beautiful. Now, what I mentioned the last one, that tear out was because of how fine the saw is, or not fine enough on this material. So this one's an 11 TPI, it means 11 teeth per inch. Higher the number, the finer the cut. But given that I'm doing this project with just what I have on hand tools, and that everyone at home is probably going to have, we're going to press on. Okay, we're going to be careful of doing here if you're bracing it. You're not holding up, that'll pinch the saw, but you're also not pulling down because that'll snap things out. So it's just about having the weight there. I'm not pushing down with my saw, I'm just letting the teeth do the work. Okay. Again, check we've cut square, we're good. Rinse and repeat this step to get our second wall. Okay, so we now have a back wall, a front wall, and a couple of sides. Now, that's all well and good. What about the roof? Roof will require 2 more pieces the same size as our base. Now, if you want to get really picky, when we are cutting our pieces for our roof, some eagle-eyed people at the starters will have noticed the way I've laid the roof, because I'm doing this as easy as possible because I want children to be able to do this, I end up with less roof overhang on this side than this side. Now, that may not bother you, may not bother your children, so don't do anything about it. This here will be exactly the thickness of the timber you're using, longer. So, two options. One, we cut this board down, or we use a plane, or we actually cut a miter straight down here, which does get technical to do the length of the board to match up. So, in this scenario, child number one, she didn't care. She was happy to have a bit of extra overhang here. With number two, just so I can show you guys, I'm going to show you how I trim it down a little bit. So we end up with a thinner board on this side. So when they overlap, we don't end up with so much of a skew. Okay, so I've got my two roof pieces. Figured you'd see me cut enough straight lines, so didn't bother filming that one. But for us to make these even on both sides, we just need to take away the thickness of one board. So literally stand one on top. And that's what I need to take off. Now, lots of ways you can do it. You can try and clamp it up if you've got a vise and try and cut a long cut down there. If you've got access to a bandsaw, a planer, table saw, do that easily. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock in the wheels on the bench, I'm going to clamp this to the side, and I'm going to get out a plane and just start taking away a little bit there. As I said, this is really only one of those things that if you want to do it, there's no need to have to do it. But we're just going to neaten this up a little bit. Given the small size of this piece, I'm going to use a block plane. Having said that, you could just as easily use the old number 3 that Granddad had lying around. I think nearly every house in Australia's got one of these kicking about. But whatever you're comfortable with, it's just about taking a little bit off until we get to is really important. We keep it flat. As soon as I start tapering off, we end up with a taper on it. Not ideal for what we want, so making sure we keep it flat. Using material like pine, it will come really easily. So always stopping to check you haven't passed that line there. Okay, if you've got access to one of the benefits of being able to use a plane is keeping that nice and flat. Not sure if you'll see it, but there's then my grey lead mark right there. So now, just need to make sure that this is the underside piece when my roof join is on like so. That should give me roughly the same overhang on both sides. Now, we've got all our components together. A couple of things before we start assembling. One, we need to wait for the bird to get in. Okay. Two, cutting them all with a handsaw leaves us with a few little daggy bits, so it's important to go for a quick sand. We can either do that by hand, which is what I'm going to do because I want to show you this project as it could be done by anyone with very limited workshop space or tooling, or you could hit it with an orbital sander and tidy it up. Does help if you buy nicer timber, so I've bought dressed pine. So to be honest, part of the sanding is going to be get rid of the sticker and any of my pencil markups that are still there. Once I've done all that, we're going to get stuck into assembly. So all I've got, a bit of 180 sandpaper stapled onto a scrap block of wood. So quite literally just going to particularly around my edges where I've cut or where I've got pencil markings. Now this isn't a piece of indoor furniture that's got to be pristine. I don't think the birds are going to mind all too much if it's got a rough edge or two, but at the same time sanding can be super cathartic and fun, and for some reason my kids always love when I hand them a sanding block. Okay, all our components are sanded, everything fits together, but still no way for the bird to get in. So before we worry about that, we need to work out where it needs to go. Now this is going to mean some more marking up, which is going to mean some more sanding, but that's okay. So first of all, we want our hole to be in the smack bang center. So in theory, if we're square down here, we line up with the point which we marked as the middle of the piece right at the start. That should give us a center line. So as long as we come off this center line equally both ways, we should be okay. Now it's about where do we work out the heights for this. Now, for my mind, we go about 30 mil for our dowel. We're going to be using a 16 mil dowel, so that's going to go there. And then for our actual opening, we're going to jump up here. Now, bear in mind, what I mark here will become the center of the dowel. Oh, sorry, bear in mind it'll be the center of the opening. So I'm going to mark that at 100 mil, 10 centimeters. So we do a dowel, hole. Now, unfortunately, this is where some specialty tooling does come in. Hole saw to give me my opening for my bird to get in and out, and I'm using a spade bit, 16 mil, because that's the size dowel I'm using to cut for my little perch. Now, you can get away without using a spade bit by using a standard twist drill bit and just changing the size of your dowel to suit the drill bits you have access to. This is a bit harder. Now, you can buy some really cheap sets online. If you're only going to do this one project or not, why not? If they are going to be cutting holes regularly and in stuff harder than pine, I do recommend going out, investing in a decent kit with a half a dozen or so sizes. But if this is the only thing you're ever going to use it for, any old cheap one, either at your local hardware store or online, will do the trick for this. Before we get into drilling though, always put a bit of sacrificial timber down. You don't want to be drilling straight into your bench. Start off drilling the spot for our dowel. So spade bit right on that mark. Okay. Now you don't need 2 drills. I'm using 2 so I can just go straight across. Make it a bit lazy, but that's okay. So with a hole saw, center drill bit, line that up with the spot there. Okay, and fly over the sacrificial timber there. There we go. So a little bit of sanding to do, tidy this up, and go from there. Okay, all the components are ready. Now it's time for assembly. Going to start by gluing this dowel in place. Just some plain old wood glue. Always try and wipe off your excess glue straight away. You'll thank me for that tip later. So that's in. You can put that one aside. Let that do what it's going to do. Next, first step's going to be to fasten these 2 pieces together. Now, when it comes to fastening all these together, if you own a brad nailer, perfect time to be using it. But as I've done with this whole build, we're focusing on what most people are going to have at home. So I'm not going to use the brad nailer. I'm quite literally going to use hammer out of my son's toolbox and nails. Now, getting this sort of angle, got nothing here to purchase on, can be difficult. What we can do is line these up and aim for that point. A little bit of pressure, not huge amounts. That'll hold you in place well enough to get your first couple of nails in. Bearing in mind, we want to go 12 mil thick boards, we want to go 6 mil in and go through. You can mark that if you want, you don't have to. What I am going to do on each of these joints, just to help them stay the course, is a little bit of wood glue on each one, a little bit of glue, and we are on. Now, there are specialised clamps we can use. As I said, we can go point to point, but probably the easiest way to do it is actually to come to the edge of your bench, clamp whichever bit's got hanging over the edge to the edge, like so, and drive our nails in this way. Once we've got this first one done, life gets a whole lot easier. A little bit of an awkward setup, but if you don't have a bradder, you don't have any corner clamps, and you want to make sure you get this in square, then nice and easily lined up. Now, when these are fully in, you're going to see you need a fair bit of purchase there. So it's important we don't go down too low, or we will split the board. Okay, first one in. They can come off now. And what you want to do straight away, any of that excess glue, it's on your bench, get rid of that too. And we have a base started. Now at this point, it's literally just working our way around. As I said, the first one's the most awkward because from here on in, we can have clamps running in all sorts of directions because we've got a base wall to clamp off. So you can clamp that in place that way. You can also clamp it in place this way. Loosely move it around, get it to where it needs to be, then nail it in. But as I've said, we are adding glue along the way, so I'm going to put a bit of that on first. We know the two edges we need to cover, being it's a matter of a couple of nails, making sure we're only going in 6 mil or so. It's up to you. I like to alternate. I've done one at the bottom, so I make sure this line's matching up, and we go for the top one there. We're nearly at something that resembles a birdhouse. So this is at a while to dry now. It's as simple as sit it on the front there. If you wanted to pull it down, you can do that utilising the hole. But notice how that pulled it up. But before you can get pressure on there, you need to get your pressure going down. And now, you can put one in here if you want. Again, if you're using a bradder, a little bit easier. Got to make sure we line up with the middle of that board. Okay, now we're up to putting a roof on. This gets a little awkward. Remember, we have a shorter side and a long side. So the shorter side needs to go on first because it is going to go flush. Leave us that little overhang. Now, clamping this in place is nigh on impossible without specialty clamps. So what we're going to do is get our glue on the peak of the gable. So what I've done here is pre-nail this top corner just so the nail's just poking through, so I can press that in and use that as a way to set that top corner, get it fastened and allow me to move things around. Now square it up, bring the bottom in, use the trusty hand clamp. Again, don't matter if it slips a little while we're starting off our nail. There, on this edge, and glue down here. And this one we can clamp in place because we've got this edge here. Now, for where do you line this up? Easiest way is to go straight line, because we know we've made everything square. About here. Little dot. You know where you're going to start. Okay, there we have it. Little birdhouse you can do with your kids in about an hour. From this point, there are some other things we can do. I can grab a nail punch if I've got access to one, or just a bigger nail, and make sure all these are punched right in, just for a bit better finish. Then you can stain it, you can paint it, do whatever you want in terms of its final finish, but in terms of the build, you are now done. So just to recap, everything I used to make this little birdhouse is here on the bench in front of me. I had 3 clamps, some wood glue, box of nails, a tri-square, pencil, tape, nail punch. Don't have to have the nail punch if you don't want to go to that extra step. I did use a blocking plane to even up the underside of my roof. Again, optional extra, it doesn't have to happen. Some sandpaper, a tenon saw, could have just as easily used a panel saw or a coping saw, any sort of saw you can get your hand on. You don't need 2 drills, I just didn't want to have to change over in between. So I had my hole saw for my large hole, a spade bit for my dowel there. But again, as I said earlier, that spade bit could change out for a standard twist bit. And just make sure you got the right side twist bit for the dowel you're going to be using. So as you can see, most of us would have, say for that plane, most of this stuff lying around the house. So it means this weekend you too can build a birdhouse that's going to sit in the tree or on a fence and be used in your backyard. To hang it, all I'm going to be doing is putting a long Phillips head bit on, going through the back and drilling straight into my fence or tree, and that's how I'm going to do that. So there you have it, guys. Simple birdhouse you can make with your kids this weekend. For mine, these are going to get hit with a lick of paint. I'm not going anywhere near that. Kids love that part, so they'll be doing that. Once I've got them up and mounted in the yard, I'll be sure to post some photos over on my Instagram. So if you're still here, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Hit that like button, and don't forget, jump across and subscribe. And as always, have a good one, guys.